Hello and welcome to the course. Throughout this course we'll be using Kali Linux, a computer system specifically designed for hacking and cybersecurity. Now in this course is all about password cracking. We'll be cracking online passwords, so anything on the network or on the internet, and offline passwords. You can think of them as any files, password protected zip files, compressed archives, password protected keypass database, so password software, all kind of things can be password protected. And how do you crack those things? So this course is all about that. Kali comes with many different tools. So if you go to the password attacks list, you'll see many different tools for password cracking. And you'll learn to use some of them. And as this is an advanced course, we'll quickly go into more advanced topics rather than the basics. So you will learn more advanced things, generating your own word lists or cracking different offline things, as well as other cool tricks. So it's going to be really, really awesome, and see you in the next videos. For a lot of this cracking stuff, you will need Kali Linux. So this is a free computer system that you can get from kali.org. So if you open a browser, you can go to www.kali.org. And this computer system is special because it comes with many password cracking tools. So if we go to kali.org, then you can download this computer system. So click download, and then you can install it either directly on a computer or you can run it in a virtual machine, depending on what you prefer. So if you install it on a computer, you will need a USB flash drive or a USB disk of around 4 GB. You'll see you can run it on 64-bit computers, on older 32-bit computers, and on Apple computers. Click to download, and it's a very large file, 4 GB. But once you have that, you can then put it on a USB flash drive. So how do you go about that? You can go to download Balena Etcher. So it's a tool to put that file onto a USB flash drive. So we're searching for Balena Etcher. That's etcher.balena.io. This program, you can select your Kali downloads, select the drive, and then flash. You have to get this program, you can't do it online. So download this program for your computer system. So you can do it from Windows, from Mac, from Linux. And then once that's you started, you can select your Kali download once 4 GB completed. Put in your 4 GB flash drive or larger and then flash it. And once that's completed, you'll need to restart the computer and you can start Kali from your flash drive. So that's if you want to run Kali directly on your computer hardware. It's just one of the options to run it. You'll see in the download section, another option is to run a virtual machine. So you can run a computer inside a computer, and then you don't actually need a second computer to install Kali. So how you run Kali really comes down to your preferences. It's also possible to run Kali on your mobile phone, or you can run Kali in the cloud. So a deployment downside of that is that it's not free. So it really depends on how do you want your hacking laboratory to be set up. If you have a separate computer, an installer, regular installer image is a great way to go. If you don't have many computers to spare, you might prefer the virtualization option, which is free, but it will take a bit more setup. If you don't have spare hardware to run Kali on, you might go the virtualization route. So what is virtualization? It's running a virtual computer on top of your regular computer. For example, I can start a Windows 10 computer here, and you'll see Windows 10 is running on top of this Linux computer. So you'll see a Windows 10 computer is starting here. And you can run any computer system you want. It will just run in a Windows window, so in the regular display window. See, we have a Windows 10 computer here. And you can use that system, of course, just as you would regularly do. So just as normally you would use a Windows computer or whatever system it is you're using. You can then use it as a computer, a virtual computer. It doesn't exist in the real world. Has basically all the functionality that you would have on a regular computer. This can be with multiple systems, so you run all kinds of systems. For example, maybe you want to run an old Windows system. Then you can start that and use that on top of your regular computer. And you can start multiple systems at once. For example, we can start Kali Linux. And let's close this old Windows abandoned web. So let's say we open Kali. Okay. So this is what you would see if you would have a Kali disk USB disk and you restart your computer, then you can start Kali Linux. Or virtual machine, it looks the same. So you can start Kali Linux inside your virtual computer. So that's all about virtualization. You can run one or more computer systems at once. Are virtual computers, they are not real computers, in that they don't use any real hardware. They're just apps running as an app on top of your computer. So you can run Windows on top of your computer, Linux systems, and of course also Kali Linux, which you can then use to do hacking. So you can run Kali Linux as a virtual machine, for example, using a virtual machine program. So one of them is QEMU KVM, so that's on a Linux computer. If you're using Windows or Mac, or maybe another Linux system, there are other programs for virtualization as well. So this is really a Linux-based one. So let's turn that off. And if you go to the website virtualbox.org, you will be able to do virtualization. So you can download VirtualBox from virtualbox.org, which is a more user-friendly virtualization platform. So you can download this for Windows, for Mac. Now, for Mac, it's important that it's an Intel-based Mac. A lot of modern Mac computers, they use a different chipset, a different processor, which makes that the other software doesn't run. However, Kali can run on like your Mac processors M1, M2, but the problem with that is the other system that you might want to hack don't run on that. So then you can't run Windows on your M1. You can download it for different platforms from virtualbox.org. Now, if you're using a Ubuntu Linux system, you can also install it from the command line. So sudo apt-get install VirtualBox with this command. So with that command on Ubuntu Linux, you can install VirtualBox as well. You don't need to go to that website. It's really for if you're a Windows user, a Mac user, or any other Linux system. This will install VirtualBox. So now that VirtualBox is installed, we can actually start it. So let's start VirtualBox. And this is what it looks like. So you have your VirtualBox manager, and we can add a new computer. So either click new or click add, in this case new. Then we can say Kali or whatever you want to call your computer. Select your ISO file, so the one you downloaded from kali.org. So go to other and then to the file you downloaded. Let's say it is this file, the live version. Then we simply click next. We can skip all of this. Let's see, skip installation. How much memory your computer will have and how many processors it will use. Let's say 2. Next. And it's optional to create a virtual hard disk. Now for Kali, it's not necessary. You can run Kali directly from the ISO file, from the Kali file. Click next, finish, continue, and then we click start. And that will start the Kali system. You see live system, we can press enter, and it will start Kali Linux. Now it might take a moment to start up, but then you can use Kali Linux on top of your regular computer system, whether that's Windows, Linux, or Mac, whatever you're using. And you'll be able to use Kali just as your regular desktop computer. So just as you had a second computer. Now this takes a moment to boot up, depending on your setup. So this is what it will look like once Kali is started. So you'll have your Kali window with all the hacking tools. Now one thing important that you can create multiple computers here and then use Kali to hack one of the other computers. But it's important that they're on the same network. So if you right click, you'll have a settings options. If you click network, you can select net or bridged adapter, depending on your network setup. So you want to make sure that you're on the same network as the other computers, virtual computers that you might want to hack. So something to keep in mind is the network settings. So that's it for this video, just a demonstration of how you can get a virtual machine, a Kali virtual machine, to play around with. Brute force attacks. What is that about? So a brute force attack is a password attack. It will try many different passwords. And you'll see here Kali Linux, but it's easier to explain it on a blackboard. Then you will understand the principle much better, because using the Linux system, the Kali Linux computer system, can be a bit overwhelming with all these tools that are included and might be a bit too fast. So let's dive into the brute force attack and I'll show you the blackboard. Hey there, legends. We're going to talk about a thing called a brute force dictionary attack. It sounds complicated, right? Well, don't worry, we're going to unpack it together in English. So imagine you have a list of commonly used passwords. It could be a list of 100 passwords, 1,000, maybe even bigger, like 1,000,000 passwords. Now, you could try to get into an account simply trying every password in the list. So if you have a list as shown here on the left, you could simply type every password in that list yourself. So that is called brute force attack, or a brute force dictionary attack, where it's a dictionary of words, a list of words. So one thing is to try it yourself. And you can be very tedious if you have a lot of passwords in that list. If you have 100 passwords, it's already getting tedious, let alone 1,000, 10,000, or maybe 100,000 passwords. So what you need is a robot program that doesn't give up. It keeps trying every password until it finds the right one. So this robot can simply do the same as us, try every password in the list, and does all the typing for us. Now, in Kali's system, computer system often used for hacking, there are many robots like that, like Hydra, Medusa, and others, that can do typing of those password lists automatically. And so you can just launch it with the right password list, and it will try every password in the list you give to it. And that will save you a lot of time. It can, of course, take a lot of time to find the password. If it is a good password, it might take a lot longer than if it's a very common password. And there are many of these password lists, 1 million passwords, 10 million passwords, and even bigger, and they will just be tried automatically. Kali Linux comes with many tools. So this computer system comes with many of those robots that type password lists automatically. Now you'll see I started a terminal here, and there are many tools that type those passwords automatically. For example, one of such tools is Hydra. If I type Hydra, you'll see you can use this tool, password list. It's a command line tool where you specify your target, your password list, and your username. It will automatically brute force. Now, this is just one of the many tools in Kali. So there's another tool here called Medusa, similar to Hydra. Scroll up. You see that with Medusa you can specify a password list. So a single password, or if you capital P, a password list. So also a brute force tool. It will try passwords one by one. Another command line tool in Kali is wfuzz. This will work with web forms, and you'll see this also specifies a password list. You see here file, pass.txt with the wfuzz command. So different tools are available in Kali Linux for brute force attacks. It's just like we showed you in the example video. There are robots, and these programs are those robots that type passwords automatically. In fact, if you open the start menu in Kali, there's a section called password attacks, where there's all kind of programs to do those brute force attacks. For example, we have Hydra here, we have Medusa that you just saw. Click on online attacks, you'll see they also have a graphical interface for Hydra, where you can specify your target, you can specify the network protocol, so what do you want to attack. You can attack different things like email, remote desktop, and other things. So this is called a protocol. You'll see here some database things as well for remote desktop, RDP. So there's also graphical password tracking, a lot of different robotic tools that try every password one by one. And Kali has a different section for it, password attacks, with all kind of tools. You'll also see there's something called word list here. So what is that? So you might remember that any password, or we use password lists, list of passwords, to do those attacks. And Kali comes with a lot of those lists by default. So for example, it asks by default, do you want to extract this word list? So what we did is we went to the start menu, passwords, word lists, and then it asks, do you want to extract the list rock.txt? That is a password list with 1.4 million passwords. So let's do yes. You'll see it's extracting it. And now we have a word list here, rock.txt, in the directory user share word lists. So you can take a look. We go to user share word lists, and we have a password list there, rock.txt. Now let's close this window. We right click here, open terminal, and we can simply output that list if you want. You can do it with the cat command, and you'll see lots and lots of different passwords. In fact, it's going so fast we can't even see it. So lots and lots of passwords are in that list rock.txt, and that's the list we'll be using throughout this course. There are other word lists as well. So when I went to password attacks word lists, you'll see there are different word lists included in Kali, and you can also find many password lists online, which are even bigger than 1.4 million passwords. So you can find lists of 10 million passwords or even larger just by searching Google. Let's do a quick overview of password attacks or password tools included in Kali Linux. So if you go to the menu here, you'll see password attacks, and there are several categories. There's the offline attacks, so they are typically used for cracking passwords. For example, semdump, opcrack, typically for Windows passwords and offline passwords, John the Ripper as well. Then there's online attacks. So for websites, any service that's facing the network or the internet, like remote desktop, file sharing, and so on, you would use an online attack for things that are online or on the network. So offline is really about passwords. So if you have a password database, Windows password database, Linux password database, and you can try to find out the user's passwords using those offline tools. So there are different categories: online for anything online or network, offline for system passwords. These passwords, if they are offline, they're often stored in a format called a hash. So those hashes need to be cracked, and then there's these tools for that. And you'll see here some other tools. So with these tools like Cool or Crunch, you can generate password lists yourself. So numeric lists and different variations. Also see we have a word lists program that just tells you the word lists on your computer. So word lists should be shared in stores. Users share word lists, this directory, and you'll see all the word list that is included on your system. So those are the different tools that you can find in Kali for password attacks. See them also split out here, so you see them by category and as well as the list of the programs themselves. Welcome back. Let's take a look at another type of attack, hybrid attack. So what is a hybrid attack? This is where you use more than one word list. So here we'll have two different word lists, two different password lists. And it might be so simple as just a password list and a list of numbers, or a password list and a list of special characters. And what it will do is it will try different combinations of both lists. So of the first list and the second list together. Now, many tools in Kali Linux don't support that. So if you use Hydra or Medusa to do these brute force attacks, you'll have to create a big list yourself. It doesn't have any native support for combining those two lists. But it really depends on the tool. So maybe they update it now, and maybe now they do support it, but in the past they didn't. And so basically how this works. So let's say we start an attack. We have two lists, and it will try a combination of the first list and the second list. So you'll see its information here, and it's trying all those more passwords now based on the first and the second list together. Now in this case they are numbers. It doesn't necessarily have to be numbers in the second list. It could be special characters, maybe just other words. So you could have two word lists. The idea is just to have more possible passwords to try. And a simple way to do that is using two lists. Now I mentioned earlier that many tools don't support importing two lists at once. So what you can do is you can program it yourself. So you can make a program that takes two word lists and then creates a password list based on those two word lists. So basically the same as here, but instead have one big list with all the possible combinations. So because many tools, they don't support loading two different word lists. But this is the principle of a hybrid attack where two word lists are used. So it's trying admin 120, let me in 120, password 120, welcome 120, and so on. It's trying a combination of both password lists. Let's take a look at hybrid attacks. So many tools in Kali Linux don't support hybrid attacks. If you click here on the menu, you'll see password attacks and a lot of different tools. You could choose Hydra Graphical just for simplicity. If we click passwords, we can select a password list, but only one. Right? So a regular brute force attacks, but not a hybrid attack. So you can choose a password list here, for example, password txt. Then you can specify your target username and try the attack. But you can only use one list. So what if you have two lists? So let's say list A and list B. Then those tools don't let you choose two files. So instead what you can do is use your own program, like this one, your own program, and then combine list A and list B. Now list A is simply a list of names here, like in the video, and list B is simply a set of numbers 1 to 9 or 1 to 0. And you can combine those using a program yourself. So let me give you an example. You see I have a program here, a Python program. I can run it, and it will combine the passwords of list A and list B. So you see I run it here, and it outputs the names of list A and then with the number of list B. So it combines the two lists into a new password. But you'll see it only outputs to the terminal. So if you have output like this, you can save it into a file by doing greater than and then say biglist.txt. So this will store all of the terminal outputs into your file name. Here we have biglist.txt, and if I open it, you'll see now we have a big password list. So in order to do a hybrid attack, what you can do is use an external program, a program you make yourself, to combine those two lists into your big list. Welcome back. Another type of attack is a personalized password list. So what does that mean? It's a list where you know your target and you use as much information from your target as you can find. It can be the name, birthday, and any information you can find on social media and the internet. And based on that, you craft your word list. So let's say this example with Leonardo da Vinci, and you can use the birth year, the name, maybe some of the works, some other years that were important. And so you can collect a lot of personal information on the internet, and based on that, you craft your password list. So that is a personalized word list attack. You'll see it works the same as a brute force attack. So the main difference is that this password list is based on personal information of your target. So that is a personalized word list attack. So it can be the name, the birthday year, born, maybe some other related information. So all personal information that you collect. Also could be about works. So in this case, Mona Lisa work of Leonardo da Vinci. And based on that, you can create all kinds of variations of passwords that personal information. So it's a password list, but not just any random password list, but using a lot of personal information. And of course, the aim is to find out the password of the target. Hello and welcome back. So we used different password lists before. What if you want industry-specific word lists? Many industries, they use specific jargon, specific language for their industry. Now you can create industry-specific word lists by using AI. So you can of course find those lists online. An easy way is just using AI. So for example, ChatGPT or other chatbots, and simply ask them for a word list about that industry. So we can say a word list for your specific industry. It could be agricultural, could be medical, could be airline, or whatever you're interested in. So let's say a word list about the airline industry. And ChatGPT often give explanations, so we'll say no explanation, just words. And we press enter, and you'll see we get a word list about the airline industry that you can then use for passwords. Now, it might be that you can use spaces, but it depends. So you could give as addition like no spaces, but it depends on what you want. So you can use the ChatGPT to generate word lists as well. You'll see that for general, if we ask it for a password list, it will say no, I cannot do that. But if you just ask for industry specific words, it has no problem to do that. So let's say we search for a word of chemical industry, and you'll see it starts generating a list of words often used in the chemical industry that you can try as passwords. So just to extend your password list, you can use AI to generate more password lists. Welcome. Let's do a basic scan. So first I'm going to check who's on the network, which devices or computer. We can do that with the command arp-scan /localnet. That will scan for devices on the same network. So anybody who's connected to the same Wi-Fi as myself. So you'll see we need to run this as administrator. Default it tells you operation not permitted. So make sure to run it as administrator by typing sudo in front. So you'll see it's scanning. We found one other like a computer here that we'll investigate. So what do we do next? We're going to scan for any applications that are running on this host. You'll see we identify 2 different hosts, and every host has its own IP address, its own network address, which is 4 digits separated by a dot. So we're going to scan information gathering. We will use a tool called nmap. So with nmap, we simply type nmap and then the address of our computer. So we might as well do that in the same window. So the tool is called nmap, and then we type the same address. We'll press enter, and we found there are 2 services running. So the SSH and FTP servers. 2 different apps, one for file transfer, another for remote control. So what we now can try to do is to get access to one of these services, for example, the remote access service. In order to do that, we will need a username and password. We can use a tool for that called Hydra. So we're going to password attacks, online attacks. On the network is considered online. And for this example, we'll use the graphical interface. We'll use the command line version later in the course. So Hydra graphical, specify the target IP address. So that's the address that we got before. So this address, it will be different in your system if you are running anything on your network. Then we go to the passwords. Now let's say we know the username, so we're just gonna specify the username. In other case, you can specify a list of usernames using this button below, and then you can specify some list of usernames to try. Let's say I know the username, and the password we don't know, so we're gonna specify a password list. Kali comes with many password lists, so the password list you want is rockutxt, 1.4 million passwords. You can find it in user share word lists, and then copy this file, rockutxt.gz, copy it to your home directory, and then right click, extract here. Will take a moment, but then you'll have the password list. This file explorer has some issues with refreshing, so to refresh, we just click on desktop and back on Kali, and you'll see we have the list, 133 megabytes, that's 1.4 million commonly used passwords. And we'll specify that list. So we go to the Kali directory and specify that list. And you'll see it's typing the command for us. So we don't actually have to type the command. We can use this graphical interface to do some tuning. So this is all fine. And before we start, we need to specify what we're attacking. Now, Adam 6500 is not something we see here. We see either SSH or FTP. So let's say we select SSH as the one to attack. It's running two applications, so we can attack either one of those two. So this is the command it's using. You'll see there's some more options, but we don't need any of that. So we just simply go to start and click start. And it's starting to do the password attack. So it's trying every password in the password list rockutxt one by one for the SSH service. Now, depending on the complexity of the password, this can take a while. So here we go. It found the password. You'll see the password right here. And there is a 10-second delay before this graphical interface starts. So that's something to keep in mind. When you run it in the terminal, there's not any delay. It immediately starts cracking. This graphical interface, Hydra, it has a delay of like 10 seconds. You see here, you have 10 seconds to abort. Now we have the password, so we can now use that application to connect to that computer. So in this case, we have username password, and it's for SSH, remote control. So we can say SSH, the username. Okay, it's having some backup file. Let me remove that file. We can connect to the target computer, and we found the password here. So simply we type the password, and now we're inside the victim's computer. So we can use a graphical tool like Hydra, one of the online tools here in the password attacks. Throughout the course, we'll be using more command line tools because it gives us more control rather than this clicking interface. So in this course, we'll be using more command line tools. Hello and welcome back. In this video, we'll do a quick review on brute forcing. So we have here a Ubuntu Linux computer. It can be any Linux distribution that you use as your target. And we'll set it up quickly. So we open a terminal. And let's open some service. So for example, we can have an SSH service to allow for remote system administration. We can install it with this command, sudo apt install OpenSSH server. So keep in mind I'm on Ubuntu. So you'll see this is a Ubuntu Linux computer. If you use another Linux system, then use the installation package manager or the package manager of that specific Linux distribution. So we install a program called OpenSSH server that allows you to remotely control a computer, and is often used as a service on servers and sometimes also on desktops. So you'll see it's already installed. We'll enable it. So we can enable it like this. Now it's enabled, so you can check the status and you'll see it is running. That means anybody on the network can log into the computer if they have the username and password. Now, this is a course about brute forcing. So what we'll try to do is to fight our way into the system by trying many different passwords. So on the left, we have Kali Linux. You see this Kali Linux computer system specifically designed for cybersecurity and ethical hacking. So it's Linux based, but it's a lot of software just for hacking and cybersecurity. So what we'll do is we'll do a brute force attack. So this computer has an SSH server running. Let's see if we can find it. So I'm gonna change the font here quickly because it's really too small. So we can try to find computers on the same network. With this command, this will scan for computers on the same network. And you see it found another computer, which obviously is this computer on the right. Now we can scan that computer for any open services. Maybe it's running a web server, an SSH server, FTP server, or maybe it's just sharing folders on the network. So let's do a scan. You can use a program called nmap for that. So we type nmap and then paste in the IP address, and it will start scanning for any open services. If you have the right IP address. Okay, sorry about that, there was a firewall running. So if you scan the target computer with nmap, you'll see any services that are running on the computer. So you'll see it's running several services here, in this case FTP, port 21, SSH, port 22. So let's say we want to get access to the computer. SSH is for that. And it's not designed for hacking. SSH is just for system administrators that want to control computers remotely. So they might log in using the username and password. But in this case, we don't know the password, so we can try something. Doesn't work. Might try another thing and doesn't work. So that you can keep trying and trying and trying for hours. It obviously is not a good approach. So instead, you can try a more systematic approach using a word list. So a word list is just a list of commonly used passwords, and then you'll try them one by one. Now there are many word lists available. You can find one in user share word lists. You see here rockutxtgz, so I'm going to copy that to the home directory. And then gonna extract that. So it takes a moment, and it's just a text file with 133 megabytes. So a text file with 1.4 million passwords. So what we can try to do, if I just show you the top of that file, let's say the top 16 lines. So what we can try to do is just try one by one those passwords, right? So we can try 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you see that doesn't work. Then we might try the next one, password. It doesn't work. Then might try the next one. And so on. So obviously this is a very tedious process. We would go to the next one, and okay, if you have a lot of luck, you might guess the passwords this way using this systematic approach. But it just takes a lot of time. So what you can do instead is use an automated tool called Hydra. So you can type Hydra, and this is a password cracking tool included in Kali Linux. Close this. And this tool can automatically try different passwords. So using a password list, you see here -p with the password list. So we can try Hydra -l and then our username. Specify capital P here. You see it's a capital P with the password list. And then our target, so SSH that we try to access. And then the IP address of the computer. Now in this case we know the username, but it might not always be the case. So you can specify a list of usernames instead if you use a capital L. So let's run it and see what happens. So it's now trying those passwords in that list one by one. And depending on the complexity of the password, it can be really fast or really long, depending on if the password is in that list at all. 1.4 million passwords, so there's quite some chance. Where in that list it is, because 1.4 million passwords, maybe it first needs to try 500,000 wrong passwords, right? So in this case it found the password, and now we are able to log in over SSH because we have the username and password. Now remember, when I used this command, we specified the username directly. So you might not know the username of the target. Then there's several ways that you can try to get or to guess it. One is simply to look on social media. You might LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever they might be using. You might give a call and then see reply with, or some other kind of tricks that you can use. In case it's really unknown, the username, you can specify a list of users instead. So instead of a lowercase l, change that into a capital L and then a file, for example users.txt, which consists then of a list of usernames. So you can make a list of usernames. So let's say some names, list of usernames to try, then save it in the same directory, and then run it with that list by specifying capital L. So if you want a single name, just lowercase l, for a list of usernames, specify capital L, and then the rest of the command is the same. So if you press enter, it will try all of those passwords, but now for all of the users in that list, users.txt. So this is a very short list. Obviously, you would have a longer list of users in a real life scenario. And this will be slower because it will try it for different users, but the same principle applies. So it's just a matter of time to find the password using this method as well. But if you know the username of the target, it can save you a lot of time trying to brute force. So that's it for this video, for a quick refresher of brute forcing with Linux. I'll see you in the next videos. Hey hackers, welcome back. So in the past I often used Hydra to brute force passwords. So we would scan for a target on the network with this command. So this command lets you scan for a device on the network. It can be computers, can be other kind of devices on the network, anything digital. It scans for devices on your network. So run it, it might output a bunch of devices. Here you'll see 2 devices. Every line is a different device with its unique network address. So using that network address, we can then scan for any services that are running on the target device. So they might be offering network folders they're sharing. They might be offering access service like RDP, VNC, or SSH. SSH is like a command line version of the RDP protocol, so of remote desktop, but then remote terminal. Or they might be running something else. So to see what services are running on the target, we simply use a tool called nmap. Then with the target IP address, and if you run it, target, you'll see 1 or more services that are running. In this case, we will target the SSH service, remote access through a terminal. So we use a tool called Medusa. Now, Medusa is similar to Hydra, but it's slightly, the command is different. So first we specify the target host with the -h command. So the same target, which will be the target on your network, won't be this address. Then we specify the user with lowercase u and then the username. If you use uppercase, you need to specify a user's file. Then we specify the password list, -p with the password list. And finally the protocol. So here we specify -m, capital M for the protocol or the service, and then the name of the service. You'll see I call it SSH, which is this service. If I were to check, for example, FTP, we would change it to FTP. Now, you'll see here I used rockutxt. That file needs to be in the same directory, the current directory. So you can check the current directory pwd/home/kali. So if you go to the home directory, that rockutxt file needs to be in there. In case you don't have it, you can go to the directory user share word list. Then copy that file to the home directory. You see I already did that. Right click, extract here. Then wait until you have the password list of 133 megabytes. And if that file is in the same directory, which it is, in this case rockutxt in the home Kali directory, we can run the command for Medusa. So we can run this command with our own parameters, and then it will try every password in that file one by one. So in rockutxt. The difference here is that with Medusa, this brute force password cracker, it will output those passwords in the terminal. So you'll see here, it's showing you the passwords it's currently trying. And it's a great feedback. As with Hydra, it's just cracking the password, but there's not much feedback of details of the process. But here you'll see exactly which password it has tried so far. And if you let it keep running, you'll see it's trying password by password, and there's 1.4 million passwords. So of course, in a real world scenario, it might take a while to find the password if it is in that 1.4 million password list, because you see this is the speed cracking. Now you can do it faster if you specify the number of threads. If you run the default version without any thread parameter, it might just take a while to find the password, depending on where the password, or if the password is in the list, and then where it is in the password, because you'll see now I'm at number 21 in the list. It's trying everything automatically, and you'll see, because it was on the top of the list, the 24th password of the list, we now have the password. You see it's stopped automatically, and then we have, it says success, so we can log in because we have the password. And now we are inside the computer. We have just hacked the computer using the brute force technique. So let me log out. So we use this Medusa command instead of Hydra for this example. So either one works. There's often multiple tools to achieve the same goal. So in this case, Medusa is an alternative to Hydra, which might give you some more information about the process. So it shows you which passwords it's already tried. If you don't have the username, you can try to figure it out, maybe using social media or other ways. You can try capital U and then a list of users. So that's a more brute force than both username password brute force. But if you have the username, that can save you a lot of time to try and brute force any computer system. Of course, only use this for legal purposes. That's it for this video. Hello and welcome back. In the last video, we took a look at cracking SSH servers using a password list. So we run this Hydra command where we have our target, and we specified a password list like this. So the file was called rockutxt, list of 1.4 million passwords, which was 133 megabytes large, and that really contained nothing more than passwords. So if we were to output it, you'll see that it's just nothing but passwords in that list, commonly used passwords. While that is great, we might have passwords that are not in the list, right? So we might have input, let's say just numeric, instead of all these character-based inputs. If you have such an input field, then this rockutxt might not be the ideal list to crack that kind of input. In that case, you can use a tool called Crunch to generate your own word list. So if we type Crunch, you'll see this program. You can create word lists using the program based on the criteria we specify. So we can type Crunch, and then the minimum number of characters, the maximum number of characters, so let's say 3 digits. Then the input characters we allow, so let's say 0 to 9. And then we're going to save it as an output, so let's say numbers.txt. So with this command, it's now generating a word list for numbers. You'll see it made this file, which is quite short because it's just 3 characters long. And it then has all the combinations of those. Now it might be a bit confusing here because this editor is showing words, line numbers. Let's turn that off. So these are the ones, combinations it made now, 0, 0, 0, all the way to 999. So with Crunch, you can generate your own word list. If you have pin codes for cards, you often have 4 numbers lengths. So let's say numbers4.txt, generate another word list. With the Crunch program, we can open it. You'll see now we have the combinations of 000 to 9,999. So all the combinations in between are used. Now, why is this useful? Because you might not always use Hydra, or you might use Hydra depending on the situation where you want to use numeric inputs and not numeric. So you might be in situations where it's really useful to just have numeric inputs, like certain pin dials that you might find. So you might have an input where you have 0 to 9 combinations that are 3 or 4 characters long, or it might be that it has some additional characters like 0 to 9, but also A, B, C, and D. So using this tool, you can generate your own word list for such kind of situations. So let's say we'll create one for this kind of pet that we then want to crack, and we need to add A, B, C, and D as well. So 0 to 9 and A, B, C, and D possible inputs for this keypad. And you'll see 4 by 4, so let's say the length of those codes is also 4 digits long, minimal 4 and maximum 4. So that's why these minimum 4, maximum 4, these are the possible combinations. And then let's save it as keypad.txt. So it's now generating that list, and that would be a word list that you might use for such kind of device. So if we check keypad.txt, you'll see now we have 000 all the way to 4 times D. So all possible inputs for this input. So really good tool for creating word lists. You can create different word lists with the length you specify and with the character set you specify, and then simply save it with the -O flag to any text file. Now Crunch works with any input, so you can specify the length that you want, the minimum length, let's say minimal 3, maximum 4, then the characters you want to be included, so it can be 0 to 9, but also any bad characters. So let's say ABC, or let's say XYZ, 1, 2, 3, let's say those are the possible characters. Then -O and your target output. So if we run it, you'll see we get a word list using just those characters, starting from length of 3 and then ending with the length of 4, all possible combinations. So it's a really good tool for generating word lists, for numeric inputs. So that's how you can use the program called Crunch. Minimum length, maximum length, the characters, and then just save it to the word list that you want. That's all for this video. I'll see you in the next videos. Hey there and welcome back. So word lists play a central role in brute forcing or password cracking. So one of the keys is how to create those word lists. Another tool we can use, fantastic tool, is called Cool, but it's spelled differently. It's spelled C-E-W-L. So that tool, why should you care? So this tool lets you generate word lists using websites. So for any website, you should be able to generate a word list. The word list is like your secret weapon for brute forcing, right? So the bigger the list or the better the list, the more chance you have to break into the system. So with Cool, you can generate a word list like this. So we install Cool first, spell it C-E-W-L, and then the website name. It doesn't work for all websites, so it's kind of worked, but these days it doesn't work for every website. So you just press enter with this command, and then you wait. It is generating a word list. Right now it's not saving it to anything, and it can be quite slow depending on the web page. So let's say we break it, we press Ctrl+C to break it, and you'll see it outputs all the words it found so far. So really great tool to generate a word list. You see a lot of words can be created from a website, and this can be used to generate custom word lists. Now how successful they are with cracking passwords really depends. I think with a commonly used password list you have more chance to break into a system, but nevertheless it's a good tool to generate word lists. Now there are some parameters you can do. It's Cool. So if you want to save to a file, you can do -W and then the text file. Let's say output.txt. Maybe you want not only to do the main page but also links. Then you can do -D is 2. So then you will have it will save not just the main page scraping words, but also the second pages for any page it links to. So that is Cool in action. Now if you run this, it's just going to take a very long time. So that's a bit of the downside with this tool, that it's really slow and it doesn't work for all websites. In the past it did, but right now it works for some sites and doesn't work for all sites. However, still a good tool. So that's all about this tool. That's all there's to it. Cool can be a game changer in that you can generate word lists from web pages, but it's not a perfect tool. It's just another tool. So just wanted to inform you that this exists, and see you in the next video. Hey there and welcome back. So in the last video we checked out the program Cool to get data from a web page to turn into a word list. Now you don't have to use the Cool program, and maybe you have some issues with it, so there's an alternative, which is just using a bunch of Linux command line commands. So we'll use multiple Linux commands together. So it can look a bit overcomplicated, but bear with me, I'll explain part by part. So first, we'll fetch the content of a specified URL. So we do curl -s. So this command will fetch the data from this website. Then the second part extracts words. So we have all the website data, the raw data, and then we take the words out of it. So you'll get a lot of phrases and other things from websites, maybe some text. So we turn everything into words. That's that part. Then you have this part where we convert uppercase letters to lowercase letters. So that's just for consistency. Finally, we sort the list in alphabetical order, and then we save it into a new file. So all these pipes is to combine these commands together. And all this together will generate a word list based on the web page. So in this case, this website, the web page on that site. So if we press enter, you'll see we can open the word list. If we go to the home directory, and we'll have a nice word list from that, based on that web page. Now, some of the websites have protection against scraping and kind of command line technology. So some of them might not work, but others will. So you can use this combination of commands to generate your own custom word lists based on a website. Now, this works for other websites as well. So it really depends on whether the website allows it or not. So for example, if you try some news site like CNN, those are blocked. Others, they might work. So let's try linux.org and see if that works. Out, and you'll see that worked. But there's a lot of stuff here. Sometimes it works better than other times. So in this case, it's just a bunch of bogus data. It really depends on the web page. So for some websites it will work and for others not. But you can generate word lists using this method as well. Welcome back to the course. So we've done some terminal stuff before. These days you might be using the web a lot. You'll maybe use social media or all kind of websites. Now, many of these websites have login information, so username, password, and then they let you log in. And for example, here we have a simple website running on my local network where it has a username and password. So you might try some password and username. And sometimes when you click login, they'll give some wrong error message like incorrect password or some other kind of error message, which is great for brute forcing, because then you run a command line brute force cracker program. We can try different combinations, and using the command line we can simply see, hey, that's the incorrect password, so let's try the next password in the list. So to do that, we can use another command. So that command is called wfuzz. You'll see that if I type wfuzz, it's already installed. If it's not, install wfuzz with your package manager. It's kind of similar to Hydra, but for this program, you can do stuff on websites. So quite interesting. So what do we need to crack it? Well, we need to know what these fields are called. So there's two ways to do that. Either we can look at the HTML source, so at the web page code, or we can use the developer tools. So I'll show you both methods. It's not necessarily one is better than the other. It depends on the website. So the first way to check that username, password variables is to open the developer tools. This is different on Chrome and Firefox, but both have developer tools. So I'm going to more tools here in Firefox and click web developer tools. Then you have a network tab. And let's say we type username, password, and we can see the network request. So we see the network request here. We click on it, then we click on request, and we'll see the two variables. So those are the username and password fields. So we need to have those two. Another way to do this, so method 2 to finding out the names of these fields, is to right click and click view page source. And then if the web page is not too long, you might simply see username, so input type, and then they have the name of the field and another input type with the name, in this case username, password. So those are two different ways to can get those field names, because you need them, because we'll use them in wfuzz. So this is the command we'll use, wfuzz. Then we specify a file called users.txt. It is simply a list of usernames. So this might look like a lot of complicated stuff, but Actually, what we're doing is just specifying, okay, use users.txt, and then we use another file, rock.txt, which, as you might have guessed, is simple a password list. So 2 files, a list of usernames and a list of passwords. Then we specify the error message. Remember that when we type something wrong here, so wrong username password, we get an error message. Incorrect password, in this case, it might be different. And what we'll do is we'll let wfuzz know that message, so that when it tries, it will know that either it's the correct password if that message doesn't appear, or if that message appears, then it's not the right password. So we specify that with --hs, and then specify the error message. Then we specify the website URL. So in this case, this website URL with -u. And finally, we specify the variables, so username and password fields. So you'll see here the username and the password fields. And then the values are set to the values of the first file and to the values of the second file. And if you run this, it will try different username password combinations. So if I press enter, it starts to crack. And depending on if your password list is huge, or depending on how many users you have and so on both lists, you might find username and passwords. So in this case, we found the username password, so we can log in. We just hacked this site, so we are now able to log into the website, and you'll see we now have another login message. We have able to crack using this command line wfuzz. Hey there, legends. In this section, we'll take a look at offline password cracking. If you open the Kali menu and click password attacks, you'll see there's a section here, offline attacks. So we'll be looking at some of these tools for offline password attacks. Now, as you might expect, offline is really about anything that is not online or the network. Typically, those are password of files, like zip files, or password of usernames in computer systems, like a Windows system, a Linux system, or any other system. So usually you have a file that is password protected, and then you want to crack those passwords. So in the next video, we'll explain you about hashes. Hashes are how passwords are typically stored in systems. And we'll also explain a lot about John the Ripper. So stay tuned, and we'll go into different tools for offline attacks, for password attacks. Many computer systems, they don't store passwords in plain text and readable text like banana, kiwi, or whatever the password would be. Instead, they store the hashed version of that. So how do they get that hashed version? So this looks like a very cryptic text. That's called a hash. And this hashed version, they create one using a function called a hash function. Now, there are many different hash functions. And one of the properties of that function is that given an input, like strawberry, it's easy to create the hash. But if you have the hashed password, it's really difficult to get the original back. It's basically impossible. Unless you have a list of passwords, and then you can try one by one and creating a lookup table. So given a text like this, basically you would be like, okay, what is the password? It doesn't seem clear to us. So you can try to crack it. Try to crack the hashes, because many systems, they will store passwords in this format rather than in readable text. Now, you might still be a bit confused with hashes. So you can play around with hashes yourself. Let's say we have a certain word. You can pick any word, let's say password. Then you can create a hash by using this command, and it will use the SSH256 function. You'll see here SSH256 hash function. So for the word password, the system would store the hash. If there's a tiny difference in the password, so let's say a capital D here, you'll see the hash changes completely. So it's really hard to find out the original password if you have a hash. So that's why many computer systems store passwords as hashes. If you have a different, let's say, completely different password here, the hash changes completely. So it can be a tiny change or a big change, but those hashes, basically they are unreadable, right? And there are also different hash functions. So you could have a computer system that uses this function. If it's older, it might, for example, use the MD5 function. So MD5 sum, you'll see it creates a shorter hash and looks different. Now, if you crack a certain system, have access to a database with passwords, you might find those hashes. And then you might be, okay, which type of hash is that? So there's a tool for that in Kali. If you go to Kali, password attacks, offline attacks. And then we can use hash ID or hash identifier. So let's say I start this program. We have a lot of gibberish here. That's because I increased the font size, and it will ask you for the hash. So let's say I copy this hash, paste it in, and you'll see it gives the most likely abilities. So possible hash, it's the MD5 hash. So that is useful information because when you want to crack passwords, you want to know which hash type is being used. Let's see if this works also for the other hash one. So we start the program again, password attacks, offline attack, hash identifier, and then we go back here, we take this hash and let's paste it in. Let's see what it comes up with, and you'll see possible hash SSH256 and another one, and indeed that is the one that we used to create the hash. So you can use hash ID to identify which hash function was used. So far so good. That is the principle of hashing. So passwords will often be stored in hash format, and that's important because we can use that have hashes, we can then crack them. So often you can use John to crack those password hashes, which you'll see in the next videos. Sometimes you might have files that are password protected, like we have an archive here, a .zip file, and if we try to extract it, so right click extract, you'll see it asks for a password, and we can only see the files inside that zip file if we know the password. We can try some passwords, you see wrong password. So what you might try to do is the brute force method. You try passwords one by one in a list, and it wouldn't make sense to do that ourselves. We would need a program to do that. So you can use John the Ripper for that. It's one of the offline tools. So if you go to password attacks, offline attacks, you'll see John here. So we'll open a terminal, right click, open terminal here. If we list the files, you'll see we have the zip file, and we first need to make it readable by John. So we can use a program called zip2john, and zip2john, we need to type the file name, so the zip file, and then the output file. So let's say give it some name. Let's say secret.john. So that is an input file that John the Ripper then can read. And next you can simply type John with a word list and the file name. So we named it .john. And you'll see the word list we need is, or we could use, is rockutxt, so a password list. Now this is a password list included with Kali Linux, so we can do that. If we open a new tab, we'll go to user share word lists. So the directory user share word lists, that's where it has rockutxt. You might need to extract it from this archive. So if we copy it to the desktop, or sorry, the downloads directory, we can right click extract here. That will give you the word list. You'll see that if I reopen it, we now have the word list rockutxt. So we can actually try to crack the password of that zip, because we have the password list and we have the file readable by John. And then we simply press enter, and you'll see it started cracking the password. And depending on which password you pick, or which password the zip file has, it might be very fast or very slow. So this file has 1.4 million passwords. If it is in that list, it will eventually find it. So if it is one of the common 1.4 million passwords, it will find it. It might take a while, on where in that list the password is, because you'll see that this password is on top of the list. It really depends on where in that list the password is. So basically we just needed to run two commands to crack the zip file. So we needed to run this command, zip2john, and then this is a greater than symbol, so we save the output to secret.john. And then we run this command, so we run John the Ripper with the word list rockutxt, and then the file name. So that cracked the passwords, and now we can actually open it. So let's do that. Right click, extract here, and we know the password. So we just extracted the zip file, and you'll see we have secret.txt. We can now read it. So we can now see the file contents that was inside that zip file. Now, as I said, how fast this will be depends on where. Hey awesome people, welcome back. Right here we have a Kali computer, and you'll see I have a .rar file. A RAR file is another archive which can contain one or more files. It's very similar to a zip file. A RAR file is just a different format. They might be smaller, bigger, depending on the file. Similar to how you can have images of different formats, like a JPEG image, a bitmap, PNG, and so on. So RAR file is just similar to a zip file, but slightly different. The program to do the compression is different. Okay, so if we try to open this RAR file, try to extract it, you'll see it's password protected. So RAR files can be password protected as well. How do you crack this? So what we can do is right click, open terminal here. So always open the terminal in the same directory as your RAR file. You want to make sure that you have your password list in the same directory. Then we need to convert this to a hash that John can read. So you can use the program rar to John. Then your file, the greater than symbol, and then the hash, and press enter. So that creates the hash. You'll see here we have a new file. And then we can crack it with John. So we simply type John -- word list, and then make sure to specify rock.txt and then your hash, and press enter, and it will take a while and crack your hash using that rock.txt password list. You'll see it found here the password 123456. So we can right click on the RAR file, extract here, enter the password. So that's the password you just found here in orange. And if we now extract it, we can see the contents of the secret file, or multiple files that are in the RAR file. You'll see secret. So this will succeed if the password is a commonly used password, so any of those 1.4 million passwords. Of course, you can try different password lists. So this is just one of the many lists. You can get other lists online that are larger than this. Might have more luck cracking the RAR files, depending on which password was used for the RAR file. So that's it for this video, all about cracking RAR files, another type of archive similar to zip. In computers, there's many ways to do the same. There are many formats for audio, many formats for images, and also many formats for archives. So one format that is more popular lately is the 7-zip format, or .7z. So this format, it's the same idea. You can have multiple files in your 7-zip archive, and they can be password protected, like is the case with this archive. So how do we crack this archive? We can't use zip to John, we can't use rar to John. As you might have guessed, we use 7-zip to John. So we open a new terminal, make sure to open it in the desktop directory here with the files. Then we type 7-zip or 7z to John, your file name, and we convert it to a hash. Then we have a hash. So this file simply contains the hash of 7-zip that we need to crack. We can use John for that with a password list, like the rock.txt file again. So we type John -- word list, and then we change the parameters of it. So we turn that into secret.7zip. We press enter, and it will start cracking if a hash has been loaded. See that we use secret.7zip. That's wrong. So that was on purpose. We need to use the hash. So always we need to convert in the first step to a hash. So this is the first step. And then with that hash, we then crack the hash using John. So make sure that with John we specify the hash file. You'll see if I press enter, it's now cracking the password, and you see it found the password of that 7-zip file. So the password, well, as always, is shown in orange if the password is found in the password list. So it's trying every password in the list until it finds the correct one. So 7-zip, very similar to cracking zip files or RAR files. In general, all those archives are similar in cracking. So that's it for this video. Hi guys, and welcome back. Many people use a password manager, KeePass. KeePass stores all the passwords in a password protected database. So they have one database file, which is password protected. Of course, we can use John to crack it. First, let's take a look at this KeePass program. So we can install it with sudo first update the system, sudo apt update. Then once that package list is updated, we can install KeePass. So the program is spelled like this, KeePass. So let's see if we can install it. Okay, let's actually search for it. So you'll find there is KeePass 2 So we install KeePass, sudo apt install KeePass2. You see that command installs KeePass, and it allows you to store passwords in a database file. So it just takes a moment to so now KeePass is installed. We can close this and open KeePass. See KeePass2 here. So we start KeePass, and this is the interface, so we can create a new database file. You'll see passwords will be stored in the KeePass database file. Let's create one. Database.kdbx sounds fine with me, and it will ask you to put a password. So we can put some passwords. Click OK. Yes. This is OK. We don't want any emergency sheet because this is just an example. So here you can store one or more passwords in your database. You'll see there are some sample entries. You can click on this add entry icon and add passwords, for example, maybe Facebook or whatever it is that you're using, Google. And you can store your username and your passwords. Passwords can be generated from automatically, or you can type them. Now, in general, it's a better idea to generate them because they're more secure passwords. Okay, let's say we save it. And now we're going to open that database again. You'll see we have the file. And if we try to open it, it asks us for the password. So if we type the wrong password, it doesn't open. If we type the right password, it opens the database. So this is a password protected database file. And with John the Ripper, we can crack this. So there's a course on KeePass. If you're interested in learning more about password security, I have a course on KeePass. Now let's look at cracking this KeePass database right here. So we have the database in this directory, database.kdbx. We type that KeePass to John. Let's see if we have that installed. Yes. We type the file name, and we're converted to a hash. So that converted it to a hash that John the Ripper can crack. So you see a very large hash there. So let's attempt to crack it. To crack it, we need the rocku.txt password list or any other password list. I have it stored in my desktop right now, but it might be in user share word list or wherever you have it. So copy it to the home directory. And now we can use John with the word list and the hash. And you see it just took a second, and now we have the password cracked of that database. So KeePass databases can be cracked if simple passwords are used, like a password in that 1.4 million password list, or maybe the 10 million password list that you find online. This is how you would do it. You would convert the database to a hash, and then you would crack it using the word list. So just two commands, and that can crack password. Now, depending on the complexity of the password, maybe that password is in the bottom of that txt list. It might take a while to crack it. It really depends. Bug factor in there. It might be that the password is in the list, or it might not be. But overall, you can use this to crack passwords for KeePass databases as well. Welcome. So if you use a Windows computer, Windows 10, Windows 11, you have a choice how you can store your passwords. So for your user, you have several options. You can have an online password with Microsoft.com, Outlook.com, or something like that. Or you can have an offline password. So if you have an offline password, a traditional password, you simply have a username password. It has nothing to do with the web, with the internet. With an offline password, the password will not be stored in plain text in a file. Instead, it will be stored as an NTLM hash. So as a different way, it will be encoded. Now, with this password, with this website, you can play around with it. So we have browserlink.com tools NTLM hash, or simply search for NTLM hash generator, and then you can generate passwords. For example, we can type some password here, click calculate NTLM hash, and it will show you how Windows would store it. So this is how it would store the password on the Windows computer, rather than the password itself. So it stores the hashes. And this works for any password. So let's say we do something else, and you'll see the hash is completely different. Now, you can zoom in a bit. So for any password we type, generate it, you'll see it generates a different hash, and that is what would be stored on Windows, the hash. It doesn't actually store the password, it stores the hashes. In Windows, you can dump those hashes. And if you have those hashes of a Windows computer, you can then crack the user passwords. So that's what the next video is going to be all about, cracking those NTLM hashes. Now keep in mind there are different ways to set up Windows passwords. In this case we use a regular simple password for username password. So if I search for it, change your password, you'll see there are many options to sign in. You can say account password, and we simply use a regular password. So you'll see you can use a PIN, you can use security key, you can use Windows Hello Face, fingerprint. We're not going to use any of those fancy stuff in this course. So it's really about cracking the regular Windows passwords, so username passwords that you type yourself, similar to old Windows versions like Windows 2000, Windows 7, and all those ones. Just username passwords. They will be stored as an NTLM hash, and that's what we're going to crack. So all the others are out of the scope of this course. Really about username passwords. So we're going to crack the NTLM hashes, which is how Windows stores passwords. Hey, awesome people. On Windows, passwords are also stored as hashes. To get that passwords out, to get those hashes out, we need to be an administrator on the system, and we can use a program called Mimikatz. So Mimikatz is a program you can download from the internet. You'll see here Mimikatz website on github.com. If you search for it, you can find it as well. So let me start the browser here, and I'm just going to type Mimikatz. Then we click on Mimikatz, the first result, and you'll see we find this website, github.com parrot Mimikatz. Now it might be you get some warning, you can ignore that. So if we scroll down, we can click on buy available. So click there, and on that page you can download the zip file and the Mimikatz trunk_trunk.zip. So this zip file of 1.15 megabytes. We don't really care about the code in this course. We read about password cracking and getting password hashes. So Mimikatz_trunk.zip from this website on Mimikatz. Then it's downloaded. You'll have several folders. So you'll see these folders. This is Windows 32 is for old Windows versions like XP, 7. 64-bit is for newer Windows versions. So if you use Windows 10, Windows 11, and any newer Windows system. So we'll open this one, and then you'll see here Mimikatz. Right click, run as administrator, click yes. And what we're going to do is dump the password hashes. So we'll type privilege : debug. You'll see that outputs OK. And now I'm going to assume you set a password without using an online account. So just username password, not any Microsoft account. That will be different. So if you have a simple username password, let's say we have users. So for your user, just having a regular password, your info, sign in options. So we don't use any of those fancy things. We don't use internet password for Microsoft. We just use username and password. Then we can type lsa dump : sam, and you'll see there's an error first. So we need to do another command beforehand. So we type token : elevate. This is like elevating our privileges. And now we can run the same command again, lsa dump : sam. And if you use a regular account, so username password, not any Microsoft.com, not Outlook.com or whatever, just username password like in the old Windows systems, then you can find your user there and the hash of your user. So the NTLM hash, which is the password hash. So if you can crack this hash, you will know the password of this user. There are many ways to do it. You can do it using John the Ripper, or you can use a website like crackstation.com. For example, we'll use Crackstation. So, crackstation.net. And in that website, you can simply paste a hash, and then it will crack it for you. Now, the advantage of using Crackstation is that it contains many large password lists. So they have 190 gigabytes and 15 billion known hashes. So a really huge data set. You can use crackstation.net or John the Ripper. For this example, let's just use crackstation.net, click crack hash, and you'll see it cracked the hash, and we see that the password for this user is 123456. Now we cracked the password hash. Now for this to work, you need to have administrator access in the computer in order to crack all the passwords of the system. But if you have administrator, you can crack all the passwords of any user in the system using the Mimikatz tools. And typically a hacker will use various tricks to become administrator in the system and then try to get access to all the other accounts as well besides the administrator. So they use 0 days or other tricks to get that privilege. But you see, this is how we cracked it. Now alternatively, we could have this hash and then use John the Ripper to crack it. Let's say you are in Kali and you have the hash in the notepad file. You see I have the same hash of the Windows then we can crack it in Kali as well. So if we open a terminal, we will need 2 files. So we'll need rocku.txt, the password list of 1.5 million passwords, and the Windows hash. And then we can use the program John to crack it. So that's the same program that we used before, password cracks, offline attacks, and then you have John. So the program John, command line program. And what we do is we type John, make sure you're in the same directory. So you'll see here is the desktop directory. One way to be sure is just right click, open terminal. Then we type John, -- word list is rocku.txt, -- format is nt, and then the password hash. So that file contains nothing but the password hash that we got from Mimikatz. And instead of CrackStation, we'll just use John Ripper. So you'll see has some cache. Sometimes that happens with John the Ripper. So delete it like this. This command deletes that cache. And now we can try it again. And you see it cracked the password 123456. Now it might work with John the Ripper or it might not, depending on your password list. So with rocku.txt, we have around 1.4 million passwords, which is a large set. But it's not as large as the crackstation.net set, which has 15 billion passwords. So this is a small set of 1.4 million, which you can use to crack, but whether you have luck, it really depends on the situation. So that's it for this video. I hope you learn how to crack Windows hashes. Here we have a Linux computer, Ubuntu 14. Now the version number here is important because things always change with computer systems. So this is Ubuntu 14, an older Linux system. And you might wonder, where are passwords stored on Linux systems? So they're stored not in the home directory with your files, not in /home, /home/Ubuntu or /home. They're not stored there, they're stored in the etc directory. So there are 2 files that store the passwords and user information. So the first you might expect is passwd. That is not where the password is stored. So you'll see here a file passwd that just contains user information. So it's a bit confusing if you're not familiar with Linux. You might think that passwords are stored in this file passwd. If you open that, you won't find any passwords. You'll see these are just regular usernames and some general user information like the directory for that user, user ID, and other information. So you will need this file, but not for the passwords. And there's another file, shadow. That's where passwords are actually stored. So if we try to open that, you'll see the passwords are stored in there. So let's take a look at this shadow file. We scroll down and we look for the shadow file. I can open it with, for example, Notepad. If it's installed in here, so okay. Open it. See, by default you cannot read that file because obviously that's where the passwords are stored. Now it might be that there's a permission error or a way a hacker can open that file, the shadow file. That's where the passwords are stored. If the hacker can't get access to those 2 files on your system, passwd and the shadow file, it's possible that they can then figure out your password using brute force technique. Now important here, I mentioned Ubuntu 14, an older version of Ubuntu. Passwords are not stored in readable text. So you'll see here the user root. And the password is stored in this unreadable text. It's called a hash. You scroll down for Ubuntu user. You'll see the same thing. This is the username followed by the password. And the password is again an unreadable hash, unreadable text. It can be cracked. And the way this unreadable text is constructed depends on your Linux system and version. So latest version of Ubuntu have updated this system. And this Ubuntu 14 uses an older system to store these passwords. Okay, so what do we do when we have those 2 files? We need a password list to crack them. You might remember that if we go to password attacks, word lists, it will ask you to extract rocku.txt. Now you can find that in the directory user share word lists. So simply a password list that we'll use to crack the password. So it's a user share word list. Here you have rocku.txt. Now if you don't have it, copy this file to your desktop and then right click extract here. In this case we have the rocku.txt file on the desktop, or sorry, in the directory, so we're gonna paste it in the desktop. So the password list and these two Linux files. Then we'll use a password cracking tool. So if you see password attacks, offline attacks, so that's for computer passwords. And you'll see a program here called John. So John is for offline password attacks. So if we start it, you'll see John the Ripper, that's the name of this program. So John the Ripper, you'll see the version number. Of course, you want to have the latest version. So let's go to the desktop directory, because that's where we have those two files. So first, we need to combine those two files. We can do that with John. We can do that with this command. So unshadow, we type the file password followed by the file shadow, and then we save it, for example, as mypassword.txt. Press enter, and it will create the mypassword.txt file. Next, we can use John to crack it. So we type John with your word list. So -- word list is rock.txt. Now it's important here, all the files are in the same directory. All of them are in the desktop. So otherwise it might not know where this file is. In this case, we are in the desktop directory. That's why it can find the files. And you'll see we don't have a file unshadow.txt. We have a file mypassword.txt. So we're going to use that file, and we simply press enter. And you'll see John started cracking the passwords, and it found the passwords. So for the user root and Ubuntu, we now have the passwords. So it used the brute force attack, and it was really fast because the passwords were on very basic ones on top of the list. This is how you can crack passwords for a Linux system, or the main idea. So it's very important for this, if this method is to work, that you have the files password and shadow. If you don't have those files, you can't crack any passwords. So if you have access to those files, you can then crack the passwords of, in this case, a Ubuntu 14 system. Now it's important that these systems, they crack hashes, right? So if you open the shadow file, the password is stored hash format. And this format can be different on different systems. So maybe in Ubuntu 14 they use one system, and Ubuntu 22 they use another system. So it might not work with the current version of John, or you might need to update it, and so on. If you use another Linux system, they might use a slightly different hash system. But in general, this will work to crack hashes. So if you use Ubuntu 14, you can try it out on your own, and you'll be able to crack those passwords.